Well, we've met so many incredible people on Just Ride from all types of two-wheel backgrounds. But today we're joined by a one-wheel specialist. Back in 2018, our guest set off to unicycle around the world. Yes, 21,000 miles on a unicycle. 3 years later, he became the first person ever to do it. Welcome to Just Ride, Ed Pratt. How are you, Ed?
I'm good, thank you. How are you guys doing?
We're very well. You look quite normal and well, I might add, for someone who spent 3 years riding around the world on a unicycle. How was that?
It was good. Well, I've been back for about 5 or 6 now.
Right, yeah. No,
you just... in 2015 and got back in 2018.
Got back yesterday.
So I've had time to recover.
I want to make sure I have this right. You are 19, you just finished university, and you decide to ride around the world on a unicycle. Like, take me back to that moment.
Yeah, just about. Well, it was actually my A-levels, so I finished sort of college.
Okay.
And all my friends were applying for kind of unis and all this kind of stuff. And I just thought, I just didn't want to spend another 2-3 years studying. And it was at the time I was sort of looking at people like Mark Beaumont, and then there was a guy in Australia who was doing, it was like 2013, 2014, Samuel Johnson, who was doing this big charity ride around the perimeter of Australia, about sort of 10,000 miles on his unicycle. And I was sort of watching these people, and I was like, it kind of just opened the possibilities that this stuff is possible. You can go out and do this stuff. And at the time, I was getting into unicycling, and I was starting to do sort of longer and longer rides. And I sort of started looking into kind of records that people had done, and I realised that no one had really done a proper big world trip. So I thought, you know, I'll give that a go. Why not?
Well, you said a bunch of different things here that are kind of non-obvious, which is like, one, how did you get into the unicycle? And then two, even if I was into the unicycle, I don't think that I would be looking into world records of globe-trotting like times.
Well, I learned, my friend had like one in her garage at the time. I think I was like 17 or something. And I was sort of helping clear out the garage, and we came across this little 60-inch unicycle. I learned later it was a kid's unicycle. So when I was riding it, my knees were like sort of up to my chin kind of thing. But I knew no better at that point because I was just doing it by myself. So I spent sort of 2-3 weeks just learning how to do it, a lot of falling off. And then after that, I bought a bigger unicycle. So that was a 16-inch. I bought a 29-inch unicycle, which is much bigger.
29-inch wheel you're talking about, are you?
29-inch wheel, yeah.
Ah, yeah.
So much bigger than the 16, and the speed that I felt the first time I rode that thing was incredible. This one behind me, that's a 36er, so that's the one I did my world trip on.
Wow.
And that's kind of the biggest standard unicycle you can get.
But just like when we had Joff on with his penny farthing, the wheel size is your gearing, right? That's the only gearing you've got, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, most unicycles are fixed gear. People do ask this quite a lot because they're interested. People are interested with the unicycles, especially mine. They're interested in the brake, and they're interested in if it has gears.
I can see it.
And unicycles, you can get like, you can get geared hubs in unicycles. You can get 2-speed, so that will give you a 1-to-1 ratio, which is just the standard sort of normal, and then a 1-to-1.5.
You mean like a Sturmey Archer kind of 3-speed kind of planetary system hub? That can gear.
Yeah, exactly.
You can gear. I can't even work out. So so the pedals, your pedals don't move at exactly the same rate as the wheel as they do on on a normal unicycle, basically, right?
Yeah. You can get those hubs, but they cost like 2 times what the unicycle would cost. They're very, very expensive. And I've never played around with them really, but I do know they exist. Which would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, it would.
Yeah, exactly. That was one of my sort of decisions when I was sort of planning the world trip. I was like, do I really want to... you've got to learn how to ride with a gear, because that's just another skill to learn. Because you change gear by there's like inside the hub, you've got like a button, and the button kind of pushes out to the edge of the crank. So, I don't know if you can see it in here. Yeah. You have like a little knob, which you then click with the sort of inside of your heel almost as it goes around.
It's not, because you've got no bars for a gear lever.
Yeah, so you're kicking it back and forth. I'm sure you probably could design something so that you could change it with your hands, but that's how they're designed.
That's mad.
But anyway, I'm not an expert with that because I've never really used a geared one. I've just used fixed.
Yeah, it is super interesting, the kind of the the unicycle that you've ridden, like you mentioned that you moved up to the 36, like for your around the world trip. And the other piece of it that is interesting is like all of the gear. And I also see these kind of what I would consider like time trial handlebars on it. Can you just describe as best you can, like what your unicycle looks like and what's on it?
Yeah, so the wheel is a 36er, and then on the, I guess the seat post, there's like a 90-degree tube which kind of spans, I wouldn't even know, like a meter and a bit or something.
Yeah, you can sort of see it.
And from that,
yeah.
I'm hanging, and then from that I'm hanging two bags, which sort of one sits kind of between your legs and one sits behind, and they both sort of sit on this sort of big mud guard system, because that's the only place you can really have gear on a unicycle, because the main limitation is the front, because you need to get weight on the front to be able to balance it out.
Right.
But obviously that's where your knees go, so you need to keep that narrow enough so you're not just rubbing your knees constantly.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that was an issue with my unicycle ride. Like I'd end up just rubbing like the skin off the inside of my knees most of the time, because you're just doing so many pedal rotations.
Yeah.
Do you have to? So you have to balance those bags, do you, to each side of the spindle, as it were, beneath you? The front, does the front half have to match the back half, or are you in trouble, kind of thing, when you load it?
To a point. I mean, you're obviously compensating with your body, but you don't want to compensate that much. And the main thing actually I've found is that you want to get a lot of weight on the front to make mounting easier, because if you've got all this weight in the back, when you're jumping on and you're trying to get the unicycle to kind of get over the center of mass so that you can start pedaling, you need more weight on the front. So I was finding I was packing, like sometimes I was packing sort of 3 or 4 or 5 liters of water right in the front just to try and get that mass over.
It does get quite tech, doesn't it, when you get into it?
That's what I was going to say.
The funny thing is,
I'm so glad that and for everyone listening, like you'll have to check out the YouTube so you can see it. But I think Rob and I, we've never seen a unicycle look like that, so we don't really know anything about it. And so we went from having Ed talk about him going around the world to us just being fascinated about the unicycle. So I want to go back to why you decided to ride a unicycle around the world in the first place.
Which, to be fair, is a very, very valid question.
I mean, to be honest, I'm still kind of asking myself that question, really. I mean, obviously that was like the big question people would ask me when I was heading out and meeting people all around the world. The main thing is I just wanted to travel. I wanted to kind of just experience things in a different way. And from the limited amount of sort of unicycling I've done in the UK before I left, I realised that actually unicycling is a great way to meet people. It's this kind of inbuilt interest that people are like, what are you doing? What are you up to? People want to stop and they want to chat.
Yeah.
And that for me is what's, the most interesting thing about travelling. I don't want to be one of these people that just sort of get on their road bike and just go for 200 miles a day and then sleep in a hedge somewhere and then do it again the next morning. I don't care how fast I'm going. I just want to be able to meet the people that I'm through the countries that I'm passing through. And I found that the unicycle was just a great tool for that.
Yeah.
Do you have any moments that stick out to you in that way? Like, how did you discover that in the first place, that you wanted to use the unicycle and that it was a good tool to like start these conversations?
Well, to be honest, I'd done more before I left on the trip, and when I was considering doing a big cycling trip, I had done more riding on the unicycle than I had on two-wheel bikes. I really didn't do much two-wheel riding at all. I mean, I did a ride recently with a group of sort of roadies, and they lent me a road bike, and I didn't know how to change gear.
Yeah.
I'd never seen on the like the bar ends of the brakes. I was trying to work out how do you change gear.
Yeah.
So my experiences with the one wheel, I have now started to get a bit into two-wheel riding, but for me it was just the obvious choice. And the thing is, it's not. You can still do decent distances on the unicycle.
Right.
I was trying to average around sort of 40, 50 miles. That was kind of my aim.
What, in a day, really?
There was obviously some days I did there were some days I did a lot less, but there was other days I did a lot more.
Do you know what the average speed is when you were like those for those 40 or 50 miles?
Yeah, I mean on a flat road, if you're just sort of cruising along, not really pushing that hard, you can easily do sort of 10 to 12. That's about comfortable. Anything faster than that, your legs start to, you're just running your legs a bit too fast, which is the issue. Like going downhill, you don't really get that respite. I do have a brake, so I can take a bit of weight off my knees.
Yeah.
And you don't need a brake, but it is helpful when you've got sort of, I don't know how heavy it was at points. It was like 40 kilos.
Wow.
So you're trying to keep 40 kilos sort of back from rolling down the hill. It is useful to have that, but you're still limited by how fast you can pedal. So, at some points, I think I managed to hit about 18. Because you know that if you fall off at that speed, you're going to do yourself some damage. That's it, yeah.
And so how did you...
Yeah, it's not like, I know you spoke to Joff on his penny farthing, and I mean, with a penny farthing, at least you got two wheels, so you can take your feet off the pedals and you can roll.
Yeah.
But to be honest, what he does on his penny farthing sounds mental, where you put your feet up on the handlebars.
Yeah, I know.
And you just let
I
it
couldn't
roll.
believe that. We saw a little video of him doing, and I was like, I don't know. I mean, it seems right when you think about it going in, but
It
then
is
how do you
actually
get
safer.
back
but-
to your feet back on the pedals? I mean, both of them are insane. So, I mean, like you said, you had 40 or 50K sometimes on the unicycle. How did you prepare for the trip? Like, were you prepared? Did you have to train?
No, I think I just decided that I would get fit on the way.
Sure.
I did a short trip in the UK from my home in Somerset up to Lancaster. So that was
Not that short.
300 odd miles or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was
I've ever cycled on any bike.
that was a good kind of shakedown tour, just to see what was working, what wasn't. Because obviously a lot of this stuff was custom built. My grandfather built a lot of the framework that you see on the unicycle. It was built around design.
Do you come from I wondered if you sort of, like, you haven't got any history of family members in the circuses, or like a history of unicyclists in the family. I don't know, like, it sounds like your granddad's into it too. Why, I guess I'm wondering why where did the interest in unicycles come from? Because it is quite a bizarre vehicle, isn't it? Especially to go around the world on, to be honest.
It is. Yeah, it is. But I think that's the reason that I chose it, because I two-wheel just sounded a bit
What, and it was
dull.
just watching those videos and you kind of got inspired seeing some dude go around Australia in one, and that was it, really. And I mean, yeah, why not?
I just wanted to do something unique, and I knew it would be a challenge. I knew it would be something that would push me. But I was aware that given enough time, I could probably do it. To be fair, like when I set off on the trip, I thought it would take me 18 months.
Did you?
Ended up taking me like 3.5 years. So a little bit longer.
You enjoyed yourself, right? You weren't out to set a record for speed, you know.
Yeah.
That's what you said, yeah.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And so you, like you said, you went up to Somerset, 300 miles, and you were thinking that you can now just get yourself fit on the way.
Yeah, and that's the story with because I met a lot of other cycle tourers on two wheels and actually rode with a lot of them when I was on my world trip. And that's their story as well. Like you don't need to be this sort of super hardcore cyclist if you want to do a long distance cycle tour. If anything, you just need to be doing it every day, and you just build up that fitness naturally. It shouldn't be a limiting factor. Like if you're sitting there now and just thinking, I want to go on a cycle tour, but I don't think I'm fit enough, I can only ride 10 miles.
Right.
That's me.
Then you're fit enough. Like you can ride around the world like that.
Right,
you
sure.
just need the time.
Yeah.
And you will get fitter doing it.
Is it difficult to plan a route for a unicycle than, say, would you choose a different route to someone who cycled around planet Earth?
Yeah, I mean now I'm doing a bit more two-wheeled cycling, and I've found that it's much more freeing being on two wheels, because you can just pick sort of more the sort of off-roady routes.
Yeah.
Off-road on a unicycle is tough. So I was kind of sticking myself to bigger roads. But I'd say the route planning is pretty similar, and especially once you get out to places, I don't know, once you get out to sort of Asia. I mean, I spent a lot of time in Asia because it's a big old continent.
Sure.
But once you get out to sort of Central Asia and these kind of places, and even China, you're pretty limited with which roads you want to pick, really. Which is why it's a pretty great a place to kind of meet people, because other cycle tourers are generally taking the same roads. So like Kazakhstan, for instance, I met like 2 Germans, and I rode with them for a good 3 weeks. They pushed me hard, actually. Like we were doing about 60 miles a day.
And they were on normal bikes?
And they were on normal bikes.
I'd like to have seen. I can't even imagine it. Tag along with us.
But to be fair, like out there is just one road that you pick, so it makes route planning quite easy, and I quite enjoyed that. Like the big sections of desert, where like Australia and
Good grief.
sort of places in Central Asia, I kind of like I like that. You just pick a road, you're on that road, and you just ride it all day, and then you sleep, and the next day you get up and you do it, and there's not that kind of decision making. You're just making progress down that one kind of empty road. I really enjoyed that part of the trip.
Well,
Yeah.
that is, we did hear a story about you almost got hit by a car in Kazakhstan. It was like sub-zero temperatures, and you thought you might have to put your trip on hold?
Well, I did put my trip on hold. So I was out in Kazakhstan. I'd done a month of riding, and the way the kind of visa system worked in Kazakhstan at the time was that you could get a 2-month visa, but you had to leave after a month. So I'd done a month of riding. I took a train down to Kyrgyzstan, which is like 1,000-odd-mile journey by train, a couple of days. I spent a few days in Kyrgyzstan, then turned around, took the same train back to the point where I'd stopped riding in Kazakhstan. Because my thing was that if I was on the road, I needed to ride. I needed to be under my own power. So I went back to the point where I'd taken the train, carried on riding for about 2 or 3 days. And at this point, it was sort of mid-October, so it was starting to get quite cold. And then that night, the night before I was on sit by the car, there was a big dump of snow, and the roads were just covered in ice. It was pretty brutal, to be honest, sort of sub-degree temperatures. And I think I rode, I don't know, maybe 3 miles sort of out of this town that I was staying at. I'd actually stayed with the guy the night before. He'd invited me in, which was really kind. And there was a car on the opposite side of the road, and it just lost control and it started spinning towards me. And I know that my reactions, they just weren't quick enough to do anything. I was going to get hit by this car, but luckily there was a car overtaking me at that exact point, and it smashed into the car overtaking me.
My goodness me.
So I stopped and I was like, okay, I watched what was going on. Like, I think the guys were all right. There was one guy that was sort of like, he was like hobbling around. So he was like sort of jumping. So he looked like he was a little bit in pain. I'm not sure if he was doing that just for like insurance or whatever, or to make the other guy feel bad.
Well, there's a blame, there's a claim.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just still standing by the side of the road there watching this happen. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to sneak off here because I don't want these two guys because they were arguing at each other. And I didn't want them to then look at me and go, hey, we're going to blame that guy on his unicycle.
You could have you could have disappeared there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was pretty shaken up. So I went, there was like 200 meters away, there was this petrol station. So I walked into this petrol station. The guys were really lovely. I think they'd seen what happened. They gave me like a tea and some sweets and things. And I just sort of sat there for an hour, half an hour, just sort of thinking, okay, do I want, because at this point, this was the last big town that I was going to see for about 1,000 miles.
Oh.
And I was just considering, like, do I want to push into like this cold sort of ice world for the next 1,000 miles?
That'd be 20 days,
with the
right?
possibility of, I needed to, at that point, I had 30 days left on my visa, or 29 or something, so I needed to do it in that. I think it was 1,000, maybe 300 or something miles.
That's a long way up, sort of 50 miles a day, isn't it? That is. And where would you sleep then if it was so remote?
Yeah.
I mean, did you, because it's so cold, I guess you sleeping outdoors wasn't an option, or is that how you did it?
Yeah, no, that's why the unicycle looks like it
Doesn't
looks.
look like it's got a massive duvet and tent on there. To me, doesn't look like it's equipped for sub-zero camping. That's what I'm saying.
No, exactly. No, you make it work, but at that point it was getting pretty brutal. There were some nights where it was getting down to sort of -5, -8, I think was maybe the coldest. And my gear wasn't really up for it. I wasn't going to die, but I just wasn't sleeping much at night because it was cold. I wasn't really equipped for it.
And so you were sitting there in the petrol station, and you had, like you said, 29 days on your visa. What happened? What was going through your mind?
Well, I just thought I didn't want to. I didn't want to do it.
Oh, really?
I didn't want to put myself through that. I just thought, actually, that's not smart. And the thing is, I knew that I'd be heading out onto these roads where these big trucks and whatever, and if one of them lost control, then
It's
you just
super dangerous, isn't it?
It can be. That's the biggest danger. Like,
Yeah.
people think that, doing this kind of stuff, you're going to meet nasty people.
Yeah.
But really, and just by the way, you're not. Everyone is pretty lovely in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the biggest danger is being out on these roads, because you're on the roads for hours a day. You're gonna, something is possibly gonna happen. And as I found, my reactions just weren't going to be quick enough to deal with it.
Yeah.
So I sat there and I thought, actually, that's not smart. So I phoned the guy that I actually stayed with the night before. So luckily I had a contact in that town, and he picked me up. I stayed with him again that night, and then he dropped me back to the train station the next morning. So I thought, okay, I'll pause the ride here. I'll wait it out in Kyrgyzstan, because that was kind of a better place to wait than Kazakhstan. Like, the visa situation, I think you can spend like 3 months.
No way.
And then if you want to stay longer, you just do a little out and back to a border.
Okay.
So it seemed like the obvious place to go, and I'd already been there. I'd met some people in that week that I was there before. So I thought, okay, I'll wait it out there, wait for the weather to get better, and then when it does, I'll take the same train, another 2-day train, back to Aktobe, this town where I was almost hit, and I'll continue the ride, because I was adamant that if I was going to do this, I needed to be true and actually ride every meter.
Huh.
Because you start skipping sections, I feel like you can't really say that you've done what you've claimed, So
No,
that was really important.
You might
to
feel
me.
a bit hollow. I think if you're going to do it, you're right. You're probably only going to do it once, perhaps in your lifetime. You might as well do it right. Yeah, yeah.
But Ed,
exactly.
the ride wasn't categorized as a Guinness World Record. Why was that?
Yeah, so there's a bit of a story behind this. So when I set off, I did intend to try and get it sort of recognised officially, whatever that means, officially by Guinness, by the beer company. I've since had
put it like that,
a sort of change.
Yeah.
It's lost a little bit of its esteem.
A little bit of animosity there, maybe. No, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, I don't know. You might have been like me. You sort of grow up, you read these sort of Guinness
for sure.
World Record books.
Yeah, I used to have that book. Read it religiously. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there are rules for riding around the world where you've got to ride at least 18,000 miles. You've got to obviously go in one direction. So my direction was east, and the reason for that, and most sort of people that have done world trips will tell you the reason you go east is because that's where sort of the wind direction is primarily going. So you get a little bit of advantage doing that. But also it just made sense leaving from the UK and heading off towards Europe rather than having that big expense of like flying to the States, let's say.
Right.
And then realising a week in that I didn't want to do it, at least starting from my home and starting from Europe, I could just take it easy and just see how it went. And then you've also got to ride through 2 antipodal points.
Right.
So if you take the globe, you work out which points are like directly opposite, and there's only so many points on the Earth where that's possible, because obviously there's a lot of sea.
Oh, is that right?
But the big ones, the ones that
You have to click 2 points exactly opposite on Earth. Yeah.
you have to go through them. Yeah, that's Guinness's rules.
No way.
There's one. Yeah, so there's a couple, one in Spain and one in New Zealand. They're like exact opposites. There's a specific place, and I can't remember exactly where that is.
Huh.
And I think that's basically the rules. But their other rule was that you can't stop for more than 2 weeks.
Okay.
And that was the big one. And to be fair, like I just don't. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to just change the trip so dramatically just to try and fit those rules. And it would have meant sort of carrying on into this sort of icy sort of wasteland, putting myself at danger, and I was like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
It sounds. Do you think if you hadn't been involved in that car accident, though, like that, it sounds to me like that really took the wind out of your sails, and all of a sudden you were kind of second guessing what you. It made you aware of just how risky and how exposed you were, I suppose, right?
Yeah, I mean, my plan was always at that point. I was thinking, okay, I'll ride through Kazakhstan, I'll get to Kyrgyzstan, and then I'll stop for the winter. But it just took me quicker than I was expecting.
Oh, it got you. You plan to stop in one of those countries for a winter, aren't they? Absolutely the most Baltic places on earth to be for a winter. Wouldn't you have? I think I'd have picked like Hawaii.
Yeah, but I'd rather be stopped in.
No, seems like I don't think that would have been my winter destination.
Yeah, but you can't choose. Like when you got distances this big, you just stop wherever you ended up. So I was in that part of the world, so that's where made most sense. And it is beautiful out there. It's cold, but I'd rather stop in an apartment for the winter than rather than sort of sleeping in my tent.
And how
all the
long did
time.
you live in Kazakhstan for then?
I think I was there for about 4 months, 5 months maybe 4 months.
Did you get a job or anything, or what did you sort of do with your days? Because
I taught English.
no way,
So I found a local
amazing.
school and
No way.
yeah. I don't think it was totally legal. Like I think more the second day I was working there.
You won't be getting a visa to Kazakhstan again.
So I was told that if the police turned up, then I needed to hide in a cupboard. that was what I was told working in this school, because they didn't have the right documentation to deal with me.
Right.
But they did want me to help because native speakers of English are quite high in demand there, which is why I was
That's
able to get a job,
amazing.
because I've got no experience teaching. So they just wanted me at the school because I was there and I could sort of speak to their more sort of advanced students, and they can actually get practice speaking with a native speaker. So no, it worked well from both sides.
I mean, it's crazy. We've been talking about just this one piece of the trip. Do you have, these memories? Does anything stick out to you? Maybe like the highest and lowest moment? I mean, I would imagine this experience that you had, the car accident, would be the lowest, but maybe not. Like, what are maybe the top 3 if you had to guess?
Yeah, I mean, it changed the trip definitely in quite a big way. But I'm really thankful that I had this experience. I think you learn from doing this stuff that you just kind of just go with the flow. Like you just work it out as you go along.
Yeah.
I never wanted to plan that much. A high for me was definitely when I was in China. I rode with another British cycle tourist called Super Cycling Man. I don't know how much research you've done into my trip, but we produced a lot of videos together.
Yeah.
And we rode together for about a month. And his thing, so obviously you don't need to be doing something unique when you're riding around the world, but he was so Super Cycling Man. He was wearing his like underwear outside of his cycle shorts, and he put a cape on every day.
Oh my god!
And he so we were quite a pair riding through China, sort of like rural China, out in the west, or sort of heading down south. Like one of us on a unicycle and him with his cape and underwear and whatever. But that was a lot of fun. Like sometimes, like before that, I'd ridden with cycle tourers for a day or two, and you almost work out instantly if it's going to work or not. Like if you actually want to ride together for a few weeks, because you need to have that similar mentality. Some people, they just want to get on the road and they want to ride and they don't really want to stop.
Yeah.
Whereas Super Cycling Man and I, we were very much just like, we just want to have an experience.
Yeah.
We just want to stop. Whoever stops us, we want to film stuff. We want to just really enjoy being where we are without making the kind of cycling really a massive part of it. It's just a method to kind of get from
Just a
place
mad way to
place.
travel, a beautiful way to see planet Earth. Did you get up, like when you left then, did you like literally sort of wake up one morning and wave goodbye to the parents and like literally get on the unicycle and pedal out the drive? Was it like that when you set off?
Yeah.
Was it really?
To a point, it was a bit. It was a bit more organised. So I did my rides for a local charity called School on a Bag, and they send out these sort of little red rucksacks full of sort of educational resources to places in the world that need
brilliant.
it. So if there's been like a natural disaster, or if there's just poverty somewhere and kids don't have access to these kind of learning tools, they'll pack up a load of bags and they'll send them out. And I really like this idea, and it was a sort of international sort of aid, but also it was based locally. It was based in Somerset, about sort of 15 miles away from my home. So I thought that sounds like a perfect sort of charity to support on this trip. And you know that with a small charity like that, any kind of help that you can give is actually going to be appreciated, rather than one of these big charities. You could, give them hundreds of thousands of pounds, and it's not necessarily going to, there's going to be an impact there.
Be a drop in the
necessarily.
ocean to them, yeah.
Definitely.
So I worked with them, and that's where that was my start and end point of this ride. So
Incredible.
basically I got up in the morning, I rode to their headquarters, and then we had a bit of a leaving do there. I think maybe sort of 100 people came out.
No
And
way.
then a bunch of people joined me for the first day, like riding.
Yeah. That's
and
amazing.
I rode down to Weymouth, and then took the ferry, and then started the trip.
No
sort of properly
way.
in France.
And it is
Incredible.
It is crazy too, because you didn't really start. You weren't on Instagram at the beginning of the trip or anything like that. Like, was there? When did you start thinking about kind of documenting it and creating content around it?
Yeah, I mean, when I started, I was doing the kind of shorter YouTube videos.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I started. But I was never particularly good at doing live updates.
Yeah.
I always like to sort of film stuff, and then if I had a couple of days here or there, I'd then work out how to put it into something that's a bit more watchable and then try and release it. And that's kind of how I do stuff. I probably should be better at sort of doing the sort of live update stuff. But I had that, and I also had like a live tracking map as well. So once I got to, because I had this like spot tracker thing, which was good to be able to document it or to record where I'd been, but also I think it had some kind of safety feature so you can press it, and apparently it'll call some like local
A helicopter would turn up and
authority or
pluck
whatever,
you out
and
there.
they can come out and get you if you're in trouble. I never tested it, so I've got no idea if it worked or not. But so I had that, and that was really useful. So it was updating my website live. So when I was riding, every 30 minutes or so, there'd be a ping and people could see where I was. So that was actually quite useful, especially near the end of the trip when there was more people following, so people could actually come out and find me on the road, which was really cool.
Yeah, what was that like to have such a big community? I mean, like the returning home video, it got like 1.5 million views. You like built a whole community around the trip.
Yeah. So what was interesting is I released that last sort of stuff from the trip a good sort of year and a bit after I finished, because I was still producing kind of video series from the trip, and there was all this footage that I had to deal with, or I'd chosen to deal with once I got back, because I wanted to share the trip in the way that I wanted to share it, and I wanted to produce sort of high quality sort of documentary style stuff. It takes time to produce this stuff, so actually I didn't release the last stuff from the trip until about 2 years after I finished. Which was interesting to me, because that was just about the time when the pandemic was hitting, so a lot of people were sitting inside wanting to watch kind of people doing stuff, that's a bit more free. I think that's what people were attracted to. Everyone was feeling a bit kind of cooped up. So seeing someone like ride his unicycle across the
freedom.
States was,
Totally.
Yeah, exactly.
What was the most challenging kind of point? I mean, you just said you were like dealing with sub-zero temperatures, and then I heard you say you rode across Australia. I guess, did you go across the Nullarbor, across the deserts there? Was like what was gnarlier, the extreme cold or the extreme heat?
To be honest, I didn't experience the heat so much in Australia, because I was there during the winter.
Oh, lucky!
Yeah.
No way.
Which was good. Yeah, which wasn't really planned. Like none of this was particularly well planned. It just happened that's what happened.
Brilliant.
And to be honest, you hear about sort of the Nullarbor and Australia, but as long as because my route basically just stayed on the south coast. So I started from Perth and I rode sort of around the coast through sort of Melbourne, Adelaide, up to Sydney. And the thing is, like, there's so many other people traveling out there, and there's a lot of people traveling by camper vans and also kind of doing stuff like. There's a lot of people that just sort of live on the road out in Australia, and they're just driving around in their camper vans all year. So I never had that issue with sort of running out of food or anything, because people were just stopping and asking me what I was up to. And I found, like, I'd stop at a lot of roadhouses, and you'd speak to the kind of truckies there that were driving the big kind of road trains, and they all had heard of me, because they're all talking to each other on their
the
intercom
CVs.
systems.
So
someone passes me and they're like, "Watch out for this guy on the unicycle."
Screwed. We got a cyclist.
Yeah,
What he's
exactly.
riding.
So I found in that way, I found Australia quite sort of easy in comparison. Like, certainly, I think Kazakhstan was definitely the most remote that I've been, and there was sections out there where I was. Yeah, definitely. I needed to be careful with how much sort of water and food I was carrying, because if I got that wrong, then I'd be in trouble.
Yeah, you could perish.
Yeah. I mean, and how much do you ride your unicycle now? Do you look at it and you're like, I never want to see the thing again? Or...
I genuinely haven't ridden that unicycle since I got back. I tucked it away, and I packed it up. It's actually packed with bubble wrap, because when I got back from my trip, I did a bunch of talks. So I was talking about the ride, and I needed the kind of unicycle as a prop to be able to show. So it's not filled with camping gear at the moment. It's just filled with bubble wrap just to fill out those bags. But yeah, no, I really haven't done much. I've done a lot more two-wheel cycling recently, which has been good. And it's, in comparison, it's it's amazing the kind of freedom you feel on two wheels.
Yeah,
you know, we sort of blast down big hills and freewheel.
Yeah, the freewheeling's got to be massive, right? Because you never, in your trip around Earth on a unicycle, you didn't freewheel 1 meter of that. Like that's
right.
you know what I mean? Not
Pedaled
compared to a normal bicycle.
Yeah. No,
they get
exactly.
to chill a lot.
Yeah, it is funny.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Because I mean, you spent 3 years on it, and it is crazy. But as I was kind of looking at some of your recent stuff, like some of your two-wheeled stuff, you've been doing a lot of tandem stuff, right?
Yeah, no, I did that for a bit. But recently I've been doing just solo stuff.
Yeah.
And I was actually out in Korea doing a trip recently. I was actually, because when I was doing my trip, I was kind of developing these skills of how to sort of tell a story with sort of filmmaking and all this kind of stuff. And I stayed with a couple when I was in the States, when I was doing my world tour. And they'd done a bunch of two-wheeled cycling. They've since sort of uprooted their life. They decided they've had 2 kids, and they decided they wanted to go on their own sort of cycle tour with the kids. So they had these crazy setups where they had their own touring bikes, but then on the back of them they've got like a trailer system where they can hitch and unhitch kids' bikes. So their 2-year-old and their 5-year-old, if they wanted to, they can unhitch and they can ride by themselves, or if they're allowed to by their parents. So they were planning to do this trip across Korea, and they invited me out there to join them just for a couple of weeks to document their ride, because what they were doing was sort of super interesting, and they realized that as well as riding and finding places to camp and dealing with the kids and all the tantrums, they weren't going to have time to be able to film their trip as well. So they wanted to sort of someone dedicated to come out, and that was a really good experience, because it was nice not being the subject of the films.
Right,
like there's so many, when I'm doing my own trip solo, you're so much sort of stopping and putting down cameras and working out how to kind of best tell the story, where it was just great to just be that kind of fly on the wall with them and sort of shoot their trip. So that's what I did recently with them. That was last month, and then I spent a week by myself. I sort of split off from them and I did my own thing. Just managed to the plan was to try and sort of see how close I could get to the DMZ, which is the demilitarized zone in Korea, because there are these dedicated cycle paths. I tried to.
If you enter
I didn't make it.
Shot, right? Is that the bit between the 2 countries?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I never tried to. Yeah.
No, I can't. But you got as close to it as you could, did you?
I went up a road and I thought maybe it would be possible, because I wasn't sure. I thought I'll ride north until I can't ride north anymore, and
until you reach the border of North Korea.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it wasn't even the border. It was still a good 10 miles before the DMZ, and there was nothing on my map to show that there was like a border post there.
Right.
But I sort of turn up to it, and there's this sort of barbed wire and these like bollards and things. I'm like, okay, I'm not getting through this.
Is that what it was?
So I sort of roll up, and these 2 guards come out with their rifles, and they look about sort of 16, 17. They look super young. And I just sort of say, hey, can I come through? And they're just like, no, you can't.
I love that you.
Goodness me!
I love that you looked at them and you're like, go ahead, Ed. Go ahead.
The thing is, I was making a film, so I needed that footage to be able to sort of show like this is what I've done, and this was kind of the point where just to show, okay, I can't actually make it any further. So I rode away from them a bit sort of sheepishly, and then realised I didn't actually have any footage pointing towards the kind of border patrol, because I had like a camera pointing back to me from my bike.
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, in order to tell the story well so people can actually see what I was looking at, I need to go shoot this. So I turned around and rode back towards it, and then sort of snuck a little bit past them with telephoto lens just to get that shot.
No way.
And then I got a bit overconfident, and then they started like popping their heads out, and at that point I just sort of threw my camera back on the bike and just rode off, just hoping that because there were so many like military trucks and things driving around there. Yeah. And at that point, when I was cycling, every one of these that passed me, I was just thinking, I hope they're not here for me.
Yeah, I bet.
But to be fair, it was fine. I don't think I got in too much trouble for that. But so that was what I did recently. But that's something I still haven't even looked at the footage from that. So that needs sort of a bit of time spending on it.
I would love for you to like maybe go into your YouTube channel, like like you said, that is what you do full time now.
Yeah, so I mean, since I finished the trip in 2018, I've gone out and I did a bunch of talks about the unicycle trip, and dealt with all the footage and put these series out, and didn't actually finish kind of uploading everything until sort of 2020. And even then, I was still making little videos talking about the kind of cost of the trip and asking the kind of questions that people had. But since then, I've been looking to do stuff a bit more sort of close to home. So last year, I did a trip. I don't know why. I mean, I'm probably similar with the unicycle. I don't really know why, but I'd always had a desire to follow a river from the very source down to the sea. And there's a local river, sort of where I grew up, called the River Parrot. And I thought it would be a fun challenge to start right from where it sort of starts trickling from a spring all the way to the mouth. It's only about 40 miles, but I wanted to try and do it sticking as closely as I could to the water, carrying everything that I would need.
Yeah.
So I had like all my camping gear, all my filming gear, and then a massive, far too heavy inflatable boat, which I strapped on the back of the bag. So in total, it was like 27 kilos, which was far too heavy, I'm realizing.
Yeah.
So if I ever do it again, I need to try and work out how to reduce that weight. But that was really good fun. And that was a trip I did, so last year. And yeah, it was just challenging because the first part, I mean, the first day, I think I didn't do more than about 3 miles because you're just sort of trying to break yourself through all this brush and trying to sort of stay in the river. You got wet boots, all this kind of stuff. You're like wading through. But then as you get nearer the sort of the mouth of the river, you can then start to get the boat out and you can start to paddle, and it actually becomes much more pleasant. But it was, different challenges with that because you've got to judge the sort of tide times as well. Because there was a danger if I got that wrong, then I'd just be ended up sort of stranded in the middle of a kind of river, and you think that's fine, but then if the banks were just covered in this kind of sludgy mud, which there's just no way you'd be able to crawl up. So that was a real danger doing it alone. So it's that kind of stuff I've been trying to get into recently. Not always feeling like I need to go somewhere super remote and sort of the other side of the world to be able to sort of have these trips, because you can just set yourself a challenge and just sort of try and do it for a few days and do something a bit more local.
Yeah, how do you pick the stories that you want to tell now?
No, I mean, I pick the stories just based on what I find interesting and what I think other people will find interesting as well. And the idea with the river was that there was kind of an inbuilt story there. There's a obvious start point, there's an obvious end, and you can see that progression, just as the river gets wider and wider and wider. So I've been trying to sort of just think about things like that, which, say you don't need to be going super far afield to find this stuff. It just takes a bit of sort of creativity to sort of think, okay, how can I make something exciting and interesting here?
And so what does the future look like? Like, is it, do you have something huge planned, or is it more about staying kind of close to home or telling smaller bite-sized stories? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a mix. As I say, I recently headed out to Korea on this opportunity with this family and managed to sort of fit in my own little trip around that as well. Yeah. I would love to do more of that kind of stuff where I'm filming other people's adventures. Yeah. Because I think that's really rewarding. Because then it's not about me. It's about other people, and you can really then hone in on capturing their adventure. Yeah. Rather than feeling like you then need to be the sort of main character, whatever that means in the story as well. So you can kind of free up your brain in that way. But yeah, so equally there'll be stuff like that, which I hope opportunities will come. So if anyone out there wants someone to film their adventure, please. There you go.
Rob, I feel like
I'm planning to the Scilly Isles quite soon if you're interested.
Well, exactly. Yeah, anything, any opportunity.
But you're dead right. I make some films as well for YouTube and stuff, and there's so, I go abroad. I went to Guatemala to do something earlier this year, and the effort and reward, it can be amazing, but you can actually probably get that somewhere in the UK as well. If you, like you said, if you get your thinking head on, there's so much. There's just adventure stories everywhere you look. If you know where to look, really, it's quite mad.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So so at the moment I'm starting to plan another river. I won't say which one because I don't know if it will happen, but a much longer one. And I think that will be that'll be interesting.
Yeah, it'd
but
be
yeah, a lot
amazing.
more urban, because the one that I did was pretty rural. But I think it'd be fun to sort of go through, sort of follow a river that actually goes through big cities.
Yeah.
Because I think that will give some interesting challenges in terms of like wild camping.
Oh,
and also
yeah.
just meeting people as well.
Yeah.
I think would be
Yeah.
so that's what I'm trying to work on at the moment.
River communities are a different thing again. Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? It's cool. It's cool. A lot of people live on rivers. Yeah, weird. I find it weird. I don't know. But yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
All those people in London, you know.
There is that.
And it's been super cool to hear your story and also just to see where it's taken you. I mean, it took you around the world, but I feel like it also took you a lot farther than that.
Yeah, no, I know, I agree. It's I mean, it's just the power of the internet. A lot of it. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing without sort of sharing this stuff, and it's a good job that I do enjoy sharing it. But it's just it's this different element. But yeah, certainly with the world tour, like for me, it became certainly near the end. It became almost sort of half and half, enjoying the trip, but also I was really enjoying the kind of capturing and filming side of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you learn on the way.
And
Yeah.
I feel like it sort of it resonates with people. So being able to kind of do stuff that's maybe people don't think is necessarily possible, but the thing is, anyone can do this stuff. I mean, my benefit was just having the time.
Yeah.
As I say, I planned to sort of take a year and a half to do it, and ended up taking longer. But
did some
it doesn't
amazing
matter
things
as long
along
as
the
you
way.
do. Yeah, no,
And
exactly.
some incredible life experiences, which is much more important than being in a hurry. And it's amazing to me. Almost the biggest thing is that you like take the time to do that. That's just amazing. Yeah, because most of us don't.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, the power of the internet being able to broadcast to over 230,000 people on YouTube and stuff like that. It's really, really, really cool. Thank you so much for sharing the stories.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ed. Good luck with your next one or two
No, thank
wheeled
you for
adventure.
inviting me. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks, dude.